Morning, everybody. Welcome back. Mike's MMA Picks here, chatting with you about UFC 308. We were treated to a spectacular event yesterday evening where we saw a champion rise to another level in Ilia Topuria. We also saw Khamzat Chimaev annihilate Robert Whittaker, but we must also talk about the elephant in the room that is the horrific UFC judging that reared its ugly head once again in the opening bout of the night. Hope everybody's doing well as the sun is shining here. The birds are chirping on this festive Sunday morning. So let's take a walk back and look at the results of this fight card. We had a winning night from a betting perspective where we had 3 units on Khamzat Chimaev at minus 220. Only third-party track play of the card ended up cashing, but I feel for those who backed Carlos Leal against Rinat Fakhretdinov. In what world did Rinat Fakhretdinov win that fight? That was an atrocious judging performance on all fronts. It was something that we really need to consider, especially as MMA cappers, when you're risking a certain percentage of your bankroll on any given fight. You are putting it in the hands of potentially judges who could make a horrific decision. I tweeted this out earlier today. If you can't trust the judges to make the right decision, then who can you trust? And the UFC is the highest caliber mixed martial arts promotion. It shocks me to see some of these decisions that are handed down on a regular basis. And when you're risking potentially 3, 4, 5, even higher amounts of your bankroll, you could have made the solid, correct read, and then the judges go the wrong way. And what lens are they viewing these fights through? We have a scoring criteria that is somewhat ambiguous, but if you've watched enough fights, you know who likely won the bout. And here, when it went to the scorecards, Carlos Leal looked to have won the bout, but the judges ended up giving it to Rinat Fakhretdinov. And do I think that the fights being in Abu Dhabi played a role in what took place? I do. Do we have any evidence or proof? Not necessarily. But it's a dangerous precedent when you have a fighter who clearly won the fight, but now has a loss on their record and takes home half of their pay. It's a disturbing trend of events that you would think at this stage in the game, the sport has continued to evolve, but the judging, unfortunately, has been getting worse, especially in this year. We've seen a lot of bad judging, but nonetheless, this is one of my take home points here is proceed with caution, especially if you're laying a certain number of units on a bet. You don't necessarily want to target fights where the judges could take it out of your hands, and that's what we saw last night. So proceed with caution, everything in moderation, and whew, my heart goes out to Carlos Leal. Also, we gotta watch out for those test results. USADA is no longer in the game, so this is a fighter who could potentially get flagged for PEDs. He looked like none other we're going back to the golden days of when Brock Lesnar was scooting around inside the octagon. Carlos Leal looked like he was on the sauce. So I'm interested to see if he was tested. That may come back and cause additional challenges for Leal moving forward. Then you have the second fight of the night where Nardiev ended up taking out Bruno Silva. And nice to see him get back in the win column. But the big elephant in the room was the judging. That was horrific. And you look up and down this card, Farid Basharat did enough to walk away victorious against Victor Hugo. By the way, that was virtually an open weight matchup. Victor Hugo coming in at, 145, 146 pounds. Ridiculous. And Basharat didn't get the memo, right? This is a catch weight bout. Hugo couldn't make the weight and took the fight anyway. Basharat ends up getting the win. Then Barnett hops up and down inside the octagon, appears to injure himself during the introductions, similar to Brian Ortega. And Kennedy Zechukwu does what he has to do to take Barnett out of there. Barnett has no business competing inside of the octagon. His claim to fame is a win over Jake Collier, during which Collier was thoroughly beating Barnett and just couldn't finish the job, and then ended up gassing himself out. By the way, hope you had a great night last night. We saw at the top of the card Ilia Topuria landing some heavy strikes on Max Holloway, who is class through and through. Topuria, though, he's one of these fighters where you have to have a tremendous amount of self-belief if you're competing in this sport, and he has it. Sometimes that can carry a fighter through when times get tough and they haven't tasted defeat, and they are invincible, seemingly invincible. You heard him this morning. I retweeted or posted the video of Topuria saying that his plan, if he fights Islam Makhachev, is to submit him. So that may be far-fetched to a lot of other folks, but it is in his zone of proximal development, as Vygotsky would say. Now, then you have Chimaev, who completely manhandled, and I mean manhandled, Robert Whittaker from the opening bell until the finish. And you saw the jaw and the teeth of Robert Whittaker. The clamps were put down by Khamzat Chimaev. And this is a fighter who's been waiting a while to get back inside of the octagon. I've heard many times that he is unable to compete inside of the United States. So the UFC is going to have to do him a few favors to get him a fight. Perhaps maybe we'll see Dricus du Plessis against Khamzat Chimaev for the belt in South Africa. I know Sean Strickland has been lobbying for a rematch, but I believe that Khamzat just jumped him in that realm. And then up and down this card, you had a lot of interesting situations where Bruno Ferreira looked like he was starting to find his way, and then Abus Magomedov got his wrestling going and was able to take out Ferreira with an arm triangle choke. That was a beautiful sight. He was one of the fighters during my breakdown show yesterday. I mentioned that this was a solid spot, I believe around minus 150 or so. And then Oralby and Rebecca went at it, and bloody war. Rebecca gets the victory, and that was the situation from a betting perspective. The odds were, you talk about recency bias, that Carlos Diego Ferreira fight really seemed to play a role in the odds of that fight. Orlby suffers a defeat, and up and down this card, man, there were some interesting situations that unfolded. How about Rafael Dos Anjos on his 40th birthday blowing out his knee against Jeff Neal? We never really saw that fight get going. Nick, you say you had a Brock Lesnar dream last night. Couldn't take a punch in my dreams either. Wow. I'd say that's more of a nightmare than a dream, Nicholas. There were a bunch of fights that took place yesterday that really got the blood flowing for me. Oh, Ibu Aslan, guns blazing. We knew he was a marauder. He was a very aggressive fighter. And Rafael, he was still warming up in the dressing room, it appeared, when the fight got going. He was not ready to compete, was throttled like a speed bag against the cage, and the ref had no other choice but to step in and stop the fight. So sheer aggression on Ibo's part gets the job done. Turkish fighter who went guns blazing. Now he leaves himself wide open to get countered. Oh, man. At 205, I want to see Ibo Aslan take on Iwan Kudalaba in his next matchup. I really would love to see that fight unfold. Then we had Shara Magomedov taking on Armen Petrosyan. How about that double spinning back fist? Rarely have you ever, if ever, seen that take place inside of the octagon. I was shocked. Never seen that before. And he was able to land, put Petrosyan out. And man, I picked Magomedov there, but I did not see him winning the fight in that fashion. That was very, very impressive. And it amazes me that I've gotten this far into the breakdown without talking about Magomed Ankalaev, who gets it done again, friends. And it wasn't a competitive fight. Magomed Ankalaev disposes of Alexander Rakic. And what was Rakic's corner thinking when they were saying that he was up 2 rounds? That was wild. That was wild. And Magomedov, yes, maybe he isn't the flashiest fighter and doesn't go in for the kill, but he wins fights. And barring that loss to Paul Craig, look what happens here, and look what happened here. Magomed Ankalaev, now his record 20 wins, 1 loss, and a draw. And look at this win streak. I'm gonna share with you his UFC debut against Paul Craig. Takes a loss there. Then Marcin Prachnio treats him accordingly. First round, kicks and punches, takes him out of there. Klidson Abreu, Dalcha Lungiambula, Iwan Kudalaba. He faced Kudalaba 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times that fight was booked against Kudalaba. Then Nikita Krylov wins a unanimous decision there, defeats Volkan Ozdemir. Then the Thiago Santos fight, wins that in a 5-round fight where he goes 5 rounds for the first time in his career. Anthony Smith, devastating ground and pound. Jan Blachowicz, that fight, you have Jan Blachowicz saying to Joe Rogan, give Magomed Ankalaev the belt. He won the fight. They call it a draw. Then the Johnny Walker situation, they run it back after beating him the first time, and they call it a no contest. Then he destroys Johnny Walker a second time. Now Alexander Rakic defeats him. Magomed Ankalaev, he hasn't necessarily been tested. We haven't seen the best of Magomed Ankalaev, and he opened, I believe, as a -250 or so favorite against Alex Pereira. Jamal Hill, he would be a massive favorite against him. Massive favorite against John Jones. And we've got to be honest with ourselves at this stage in the game. If John Jones came back to 205 pounds, Ankalaev would likely steamroll him. And even if this fight took place 5 years ago, I believe Magomed Ankalaev handily beats John Jones. John Jones, great fighter, great fight IQ, will to win is there, but he is outmatched from a technical standpoint, from a skill standpoint. And also, I mean, it's hard to argue against greatness here. We must respect the greatness of Magomed Ankalaev. That's clear as day at this stage in the game. And unfortunately, the powers that be are holding him back. But nature will eventually find its own way. And that will likely happen here in the not too distant future. We'll have Alex Pereira taking on Magomed Ankalaev, and I look forward to that day. Of course, Pereira has a puncher's chance. Same with just about any light heavyweight who enters that octagon. But Magomed Ankalaev, clearly the best light heavyweight fighter on planet Earth. That isn't disputable anymore. Now, let's see. Oh, Mushroom. Good to see you on this festive Sunday. By the way, if anybody has any NFL action on the slate today, I want to personally wish you the best of skill and hope that every ticket on the board cashes for you. So good morning, Mushroom. Nicholas, are you on the other side of this argument? Do you believe in your heart of heart that John Jones would stand a chance against Magomed Ankalaev? I think folks are out of their minds if they think that that's possible at this stage in the game. And let's talk Lerone Murphy taking on Dan Ige. Dan Ige came out with the heavy hands, the Hawaiian fighter who he will go for it every single time out. I love Dan Ige and his style of fighting. And Lerone Murphy, I mentioned that the weight cut was a big deal to me. I saw he put on a ton of weight after that weight cut. We saw a huge size difference inside of the octagon, and Murphy was able to right the ship after getting dropped early. And some could say it was a controversial decision there. I ended up picking Ige, and he was in the fight. Looked much better than or what was his odds? Plus 250 or so. Plus 210 was Ige's odds. And you look at the fight and how that played out. Dan Ige, he came to fight, man, and he does every time out. Great fighter. By the way, if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the channel and liking the video, I have, I believe, 186 videos now on my personal YouTube channel. Hundreds of videos over at MMA Oddsbreaker, and there have been many other mixed martial arts breakdown videos that I've done through the years at various YouTube channels. But this is my home channel, my personal channel, and I wanted to thank you for tuning in. That gratitude's the word of the day, man. Appreciate everybody here. So let's get back to the main event of the evening, where we saw Topuria and Holloway in a very competitive matchup. And man, you saw the power on display, the short, quick, torquey punches of Ilia Topuria, precise, finding the chin, just like he found the chin on Alex Volkanovski. And something that stood out to me also when you watched after the knockout here of Holloway by Topuria, in comes Alex Volkanovski. Alex Volkanovski has these chunky shoes that they're almost like elevator shoes, and he's at the same height as Topuria, who's barefoot in the cage. Topuria is one of the shortest featherweights in the sport, and Volkanovski's a very short fighter. Granted, one of the best fighters in the world. We talk about, I mean, Demetrius Johnson and others. Height doesn't necessarily matter when you're inside of the octagon. It's what's in here and up here. And I was a little shocked. I didn't realize. I know last time they fought, maybe I didn't realize how short Volkanovski is, but they're running it back. Volkanovski's getting up there in age, and man, Topuria at this stage in the game, tough fighter to beat. And the other thing is, we haven't necessarily seen the grappling side of his game in other than the man, why am I drawing a blank? The farmer from Arkansas, when he utilized the grappling in that fight, and man, you see the punching power on display. Versus Josh Emmett, I thought that could have been the high watermark for Topuria, but he's done it again and again and again, and he's getting better. Man, I'm very, very impressed with Ilia Topuria. Very bright future. And the other thing about Topuria is he hasn't taken a lot of damage. The Jai Herbert fight, yes, we saw he was able to dig deep, battle back, and sometimes you need to get tested and feel as if you're human to address your blind spots. And that goes in every aspect of life. Everybody has blind spots, whether you want to admit them or not. In mixed martial arts handicapping, there's potentially blind spots. You need to go back to the drawing board. Sometimes even losing will make you be introspective and have a sense of humility and take things into account. But it's a double-edged sword, because if you're incredibly confident, then no matter what happens, you'll believe that you can get the job done. If you're not confident, the doubt could potentially creep in. And you don't want that to happen as well, especially while you're actively competing inside of the octagon. So it's a beautiful thing to see the confidence of Topuria, but it's a double-edged sword. I'm excited about his future in the sport. Nick says you might be right about Ankalaev. He's not human, but Jones, we've considered the greatest of all time, the GOAT. Man, I have a hard time considering Jones the greatest of all time. If you ask me about that, I'd say it's George St. Pierre. I think that you watch a fighter lose like he did against Matt Serra, and what did that do to George St. Pierre? It created a newer 2.0 version of George St. Pierre, who was better than the first version. He was aware of his blind spots, and that is the take-home point. Be aware of your blind spots and do some self analyzing and get back on the horse. That's what we try to do every time out. So looking forward to finishing the year from a betting perspective in style as we march through the rest of 2024. I've had 6 consecutive winning track third-party betting years and dug a little bit of a hole this year, but the key is to minimize losses and maximize profits, and we're going to continue to work our way into an upward trajectory as we close out 2024 by picking our spot. So remember to go get what's yours. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today on this festive Sunday, and remember to go get what's yours, my brothers. Let's keep this going, baby. Cheers, everybody. Thanks again. Remember to subscribe to the channel. Go get what's yours, my brothers. Thanks again.